So, hello everyone. My name is Aishwarya Jain. Today we will be discussing about capital markets, which is important for your upcoming JIIB exam 2023. Before starting with this session, I would like to inform that we are providing full detailed course of JIIB exam free for the first batch. To join the batch, you have to join our Telegram group, for which the link is given in the description. So let's just quickly start with the session. So before starting with the session, I would like to highlight you about the financial market. So financial market एक ऐसा मार्केट है जहाँ पर बायर्स एंड सेलर्स ट्रेड करते हैं फाइनेंशियल मार्केट्स में. यहाँ पर पैसे की लेन देन होती है, उसको बोलते हैं फाइनेंशियल मार्केट. और फाइनेंशियल मार्केट के दो पार्ट्स होते हैं. फर्स्ट इज मनी मार्केट और सेकंड इज कैपिटल मार्केट. मनी मार्केट एक वो मार्केट है जहाँ पर शॉर्ट टर्म के लिए फंड्स रेज किए जाते हैं, और कैपिटल मार्केट एक ऐसी मार्केट है जहाँ पर लॉन्ग टर्म के लिए फंड्स रेज करे जाते हैं. तो हम यहाँ पर सिर्फ कैपिटल मार्केट्स के बारे में बात करेंगे. तो कैपिटल मार्केट में क्या होता है? फॉर एग्जांपल, पीपल लाइक यू एंड मी, वी हैव सरप्लस मनी. हमारी कुछ सेविंग्स होती है, हमारे पास एक सरप्लस मनी होती है जिसको हम इन्वेस्ट करते हैं. हम बैंक के पास रखते हैं पैसा एफडी में, या फिर हम अपने सेविंग्स अकाउंट में पैसा रखते हैं, या फिर हम अपने घर में पैसा रखते हैं. आइडियल कैश विच इज लाइंग इन आवर होम. सो व्हाट वी डू इज, हम थोड़ा एक बेटर रेट ऑफ इंटरेस्ट लेने के लिए हम अपना वो पैसा इन्वेस्ट कर सकते हैं इन द स्टॉक मार्केट. So that is known as capital market. When we invest our money through capital market into the company, this process is known as capital market. So for example, there is a person, Mr. X, who wants to start a business or who wants to expand his existing business, but he does not have capital or money to start it. उसको पैसे की requirement है, but he doesn't have the money. And he wants that capital for the long term period, not for the short term. For the long term, he wants a good amount of capital. So what he'll do is he'll go to the capital market and he will raise the funds through public issue. And in turn, he will allot stocks and debentures to the public. So in capital market, it channelizes the savings of the public into investment or productive uses of the company. तो ये सेविंग्स को मूव करता है एक इंसान से दूसरे इंसान तक जिसको नीड है पैसों की. तो ये जो कंपनी है, अब इसको पैसे मिल गए, तो अब जो इन्वेस्टर्स हैं उनको अपनी सेविंग्स पर प्रॉफिट मिलता है, विच इज कॉल्ड एज डिविडेंड. जब भी कंपनी उस सेविंग्स जो मनी है इन्वेस्टर्स की उसको इन्वेस्ट करती है अपने प्रोजेक्ट्स में, तो कंपनी को प्रॉफिट होता है. और वो जो भी प्रॉफिट होता है, द कंपनी हैज टू डिस्ट्रीब्यूट इट अमंग्स द इन्वेस्टर्स और द पीपल हु हैज लेंडेड मनी. So that money which is distributed among the investors is called as dividend. Next we'll talk about So here we have already discussed about the capital market. It is a market wherein shares, bonds and debentures are traded, purchased and sold. Where shares are dealt in the equity market and bonds are dealt in the debt market. So आप जब भी सपोज अगर आपको पैसे लेने हैं, आपके पास तीन तरीके हैं पैसे लेने का. पहली पॉसिबिलिटी कि आप बैंक के पास जाके लोन ले लो. दूसरा तरीका है आप शेयर्स इशू कर दो मार्केट में एंड यू रेज द फंड. तीसरा तरीका है आप मतलब मार्केट में बॉन्ड्स इशू कर दो एंड यू रेज द फंड. सो डिफरेंस बिटवीन द इक्विटी एंड डेट इज, इक्विटी के केस में आप पैसे रेज करते हो, वेयर इन जो इन्वेस्टर्स होते हैं दे बिकम अ ओनर इन योर कंपनी. वो उतने परसेंटेज के ओनर बन जाते हैं कंपनी में जितने परसेंटेज के शेयर्स वो आपकी कंपनी में ओ करते हैं. एंड इन केस ऑफ डेट व्हाट हैपेंस इज you take a loan not from the bank but from the company. So in case of debt market, they are not the owners of your company, they are just the lenders of the company. And in debt market you have to pay a fixed rate of interest to the debt holders, debenture holders or the bond holders. So we'll discuss about it in detail in the further slides. So capital market is used to mean the market for the long-term investments, wherein the long-term investments refers to those investments whose lock-in period is greater than 1 year. SEBI is the regulator of the capital market. So in capital market, it is a mobilization of savings to finance long-term investments which promotes industrial development. तो जो लोगों की savings होती हैं वो कहाँ पर चली जाती हैं? उन कंपनी में इन्वेस्ट हो जाती हैं जिनको उस पैसों की जरूरत है, which helps in the economic growth and industrial development. Next. So when we'll talk about the capital market, there are two types of market. One is primary market and the other is secondary market. तो जब हम प्राइमरी मार्केट की बात करते हैं तो हम बात करते हैं नए इशू की, न्यू इशू की, तो इसको हम न्यू इश्यूज मार्केट भी बोलते हैं. फॉर एग्जाम्पल, जब भी कोई कंपनी फर्स्ट टाइम अपने शेयर्स या बॉन्ड्स पब्लिक को इशू करती है, वो प्राइमरी मार्केट में जा सकती है. सो फॉर एग्जाम्पल LIC, अभी रिसेंटली LIC अपना IPO लेकर आया था. तो प्राइमरी मार्केट में क्या करती है, एक अनलिस्टेड कंपनी क्योंकि LIC कभी भी अभी तक मार्केट में, अभी भी LIC कभी भी स्टॉक्स मार्केट में नहीं थे. तो एक अनलिस्टेड कंपनी अपने आप को लिस्ट कराती है एंड इट कम्स इनटू द प्राइमरी मार्केट एंड इट रेजेस फंड्स. So whenever any company first time issues new securities or bonds और investors को issue करती है और company funds raise करती है, it is known as the primary market. Then we'll talk about the FPO, further public offering. What I have talked about is known as the initial public offering and IPO. इसको हम IPO बोलते हैं जब भी एक कंपनी पहली बार अपने शेयर्स मार्केट में इशू करती है. तो फॉर एग्जाम्पल LIC ने भी अपना IPO लाया. LIC को नीड थी 1000 करोड़ रुपए की, उसने IPO के थ्रू 1000 करोड़ रुपए रेज कर लिए. नाउ व्हाट हैपेंस इज LIC को इन फ्यूचर आफ्टर 4 years 5 years 250 करोड़ रुपीस की जरूरत और पड़ गई अपने बिजनेस को डाइवर्सिफाई करने के लिए या एक्सपैंड करने के लिए. तो जब LIC मार्केट से और पैसा उठाती है, पब्लिक को और इश्यूज रेज करती है, दैट इज कॉल्ड एज फर्दर पब्लिक ऑफरिंग. So an FPO is made when an already listed company makes either a fresh issue of securities to the public or an offer for sale to the public. तो जिस कंपनी को ऑलरेडी IPO लॉन्च कर दिया गया है, उसको अगर और फंड की जरूरत पड़ती है तो वो फॉलो ऑन पब्लिक ऑफर को थ्रू फंड्स और रेज करता है. जो IPO और FPO होती है, इसमें से जो भी अमाउंट रेज होती है वो कंपनी अपने बिल्डिंग प्रोजेक्ट्स, बिजनेस प्रोजेक्ट्स में इन्वेस्ट कर देती है या अपने एग्जिस्टिंग बिजनेस को ग्रो करने में लगा देती है. When we talk about the right issue is when the listed company proposes to issue fresh securities to its existing shareholders on a recorded date. तो राइट इशू के केस में क्या होता है, जब एक कंपनी को और पैसे रेज करने होते हैं तो वो FPO लाने की बजाय जो उसके एग्जिस्टिंग शेयर होल्डर्स होते हैं उनको ही शेयर सेल कर देती है और अपने फंड्स को रेज करती है. दैट इज नोन एज राइट इशू. एग्जिस्टिंग शेयर होल्डर्स के थ्रू ही उनसे और पैसे रेज करना, उनको फ्रेश सिक्योरिटीज इशू करके. सो इन केस ऑफ राइट इश्यूज, जो शेयर्स होते हैं वो एग्जिस्टिंग शेयर होल्डर्स को एक डिस्काउंटेड प्राइस पे मिलते हैं. तो LIC के IPO का सपोज अगर प्राइस 900 रुपए है तो वो इन केस ऑफ राइट इशू वो शेयर्स इन्वेस्टर्स को 800-700 में मिल जाते हैं. सो एग्जिस्टिंग शेयर होल्डर्स get it at a discounted rate. When we talk about the private placement, it is a sale of stock shares or bonds to a pre-selected investors and institutions rather than on an open market. So when we talk about private placement, a company sells its shares only to the selected investors. जैसे कि कंपनी ने सेल करे अपने शेयर्स टू म्यूचुअल फंड्स, इंश्योरेंस कंपनीज, बैंक्स, वेंचर कैपिटलिस्ट. जब एक कंपनी अपने पैसे रेज करती है थ्रू सेलेक्टेड ग्रुप ऑफ इन्वेस्टर्स, कंपनीज, इंस्टीट्यूशंस के थ्रू, rather than the retail investors, like public, पूरी जनरल पब्लिक को ऑफर करने की बजाय, रिटेल इन्वेस्टर्स को ऑफर करने की बजाय शेयर्स कंपनी इंस्टीट्यूशंस को ऑफर करती है, दैट इज नोन एज प्राइवेट प्लेसमेंट. सो ये तरीके हैं जैसे कंपनी पैसों को रेज करती है, थ्रू एन IPO, through an FPO, through a right issue, through a private placement. These are the ways through which the company can issue money, can issue shares and raise fund from the market. Now we'll talk about the secondary market. When we talk about the secondary market, for example, जो investors थे उन्होंने already कंपनी के shares purchase कर लिए, directly उन्होंने कंपनी से shares buy कर लिए. अब उसके बाद क्या होता है, investors को वो shares sell करने हैं. अब कंपनी से investors purchase तो कर लिए in the primary market और कंपनी को पैसे भी दे दिए, पर अब जब investors को वो shares sell करने होते हैं तो वो primary market में sell नहीं कर सकता है, because कंपनी वो shares वापस purchase नहीं करती है. तो अब जब उनको वो शेयर्स सेल करने होते हैं, the investors gets into the secondary market. So what does secondary market do? The secondary market, it provides liquidity of the shares. So whenever an investor wants to sell its share, it can do only through the secondary market. It is a market for old securities. So after shares are allotted to the investors, that stocks get listed on the stock exchange. Now through stock exchange, buyers and sellers sell and buy shares. So when we are buying and selling on NSE and BSE, we are dealing in secondary market. So here, the shares and money get exchanged between the investors and the company is not involved. For example, if you are buying Tata shares, then you are buying it from the other investor and not from the Tata company directly. It is also called the aftermarket because already issued shares in the primary market are traded here. Here, the price of the share is determined by the demand and supply. So the financial products or instruments which are dealt in the secondary market are, first is equity, debentures, bonds. They also have various types of instruments which are bought and sold in the secondary market. First, we'll talk about the equity. Equity is the ownership of the shares which may have debt or other liabilities attached to them. So in case of equity, you provide money to the company, and whenever the company grows, it have profits, the company will deliver you that profit in the form of dividend. So in case of equity, the company is not obliged to pay you. So there are various types of equity which we'll discuss ahead. First is bonus shares. Bonus shares are a sort of a free shares which are given by a company to its shareholders. For example, if a company issues bonus shares in the ratio of 3:1, it means that they are giving 3 shares free for every 1 share held. And when we talk about preference shares are given preference over the equity shareholders. How they are given preference over the equity shareholders are, first, in case of equity shareholders, they are given dividend. The dividend are paid to the preference shareholders prior to the equity shareholders. And in case of the liquidation of the company, preference shareholders have a prior claim on the capital of or the assets of the company, and preference shareholders does not have the voting right in the company, wherein the equity shareholders have the voting rights in the general meeting of the company. So they are convertible preference shares. It can be converted into equity shares, participating preference shares, and more. Now we'll talk about the government securities. So we have talked about the equity. Now we'll talk about the government securities. And now what happened is, suppose, for example, if government wants to raise funds from the public. For example, government has to repay its debt, or government has to complete any of its project. So in case of need, government can also raise funds from the public through issuing G-Secs, which are called as government securities. So these are issued by the RBI on the behalf of the central or state government. And these securities are absolutely risk-free because these are guaranteed by the government. When we talk about debentures, debenture is a medium to long-term debt instrument issued by the large companies to borrow money at a fixed rate of interest. It can be converted into shares while bonds cannot, and it can be secured or unsecured. So here, when we talk about debentures, it is a sort of a loan which a company takes from the market. So in case of debenture, a fixed rate of interest is there. Whenever a company issues debenture, there is a certificate which a company issues wherein it is written that this much amount of interest will be paid to you, and this much amount the company has borrowed from the particular investor. So it is a sort of a loan taken not from the bank but from the public at large. So bond, it is also a type of a debenture. When we talk about bond, it is a negotiable certificate evidencing indebtedness. It is normally secured. A bond security is generally issued by the company, municipality, or a government agency. So when we talk about bonds, for example, if a company needs money, as I already explained you, number one possibility is the company can raise money from the bank. Number two possibility is company can raise money through equity shares. And number three possibility is the company can take that loan not from the bank, but from the public. So here the investor lends the money to the company and the company pays fixed rate of interest to the investor. So it is a fixed income security. So here the bond holders and the debenture holders get the fixed rate of interest. Now we'll talk about the types of bonds. So there are various types of bonds. First is the coupon bond. The coupon is the interest rate which the investor gets on the bond. So the coupon is equal to the interest rate which the bond holder gets. So coupon bond are the normal bonds on which the issuer pays the investor or holder interest at a predetermined rate. at agreed intervals, normally twice a year. Second, we'll talk about zero coupon bond. Zero coupon bond means zero interest bond. A bond issued at a discount and repaid at a face value is called as a zero coupon bond. In case of a zero coupon bond, no interest is paid on the bond. So how will the investor earn? For example, if the face value of the bond is rupees 100, the company will issue that bond at rupees 95. Then what will the company do? The company will issue that bond at a discounted rate. And while in case of the redemption, the full face value is given to the investors. For example, the investor right now paid rupees 95 rupees only, whereas the face value of the bond is rupees 100. At the date of the maturity or redemption, the investor will get 100 rupees as a redemption value. So the 5 rupees earned is the premium which the investor earned through this bond. Third, we'll talk about the convertible bond. A bond giving the investor the option to convert the bond into equity at a fixed conversion price is referred to as convertible bond. A bond which can be converted into equity is called the convertible bond. A perpetual bond is a bond with no maturity date that is not redeemable but pays a steady stream of interest forever. When we talk about the perpetual bond, it is a bond where there is no maturity. Matlab you will never get your principal back. What you will get is just a flow of interest forever. There would be a fixed income flow to you forever, but there would be no maturity date of it. So that is known as perpetual bond. So now we'll talk about, as I've already discussed you, there is one primary market and the secondary market. In the primary market, the corporate, through the issue of new securities, raise funds. So here the dealing happens between the company and the investor. The company raises money through the investors by raising funds through the issue of new securities. When we talk about the secondary market, herein the investors buy and sell securities between them. So the price of the share depends upon the demand and supply of the shares. So here the investors exchange shares between them. So it happens in the existing securities. The securities which are already issued in the primary market are dealt in the secondary market. So there are various sort of trading products I have already discussed with you, equity securities, debt securities. And there are also foreign exchange and derivatives, which includes futures and options, which I will discuss you in another section. Now we'll talk about the ESBA, application supported by blocked amount. So in this case, suppose for example, किसी company का public issue आया है and आपने 20,000 rupees के shares buy करने के लिए apply कर दिया. Now जो 20,000 के shares जो हैं, जो 20,000 रुपए हैं, वो आपके अकाउंट में ब्लॉक हो जाते हैं. सपोज LIC का IPO आया था और आपको अप्लाई करना था, आपने बोला 20,000 रुपीज का मेरे को एक लॉट खरीदना है. So in that case, that 20,000 rupees get blocked into your bank account whenever you apply for that IPO. So if when the shares are allotted, जिस दिन वो shares allot होते हैं, उस दिन वो अमाउंट आपके बैंक अकाउंट से डेबिट होकर कंपनी के अकाउंट में क्रेडिट हो जाता है और आपके अकाउंट में शेयर्स आ जाते हैं in the dematerialized form. While on the other hand, if the shares are not allotted to you, the block amount gets free. Matlab, the block amount gets free and you can use that money freely. And the person gets the interest on that blocked amount. The point to be noted over here is that the interest is earned on that blocked amount, because as this IPO process is a very long process, it takes a duration of around 5 to 7 days to earn an interest on such amount. SEBI has come up with this new system. So it is a system of blocking the funds of applicants of IPOs in their respective accounts and release the funds to the company from such blocked accounts only after the allotment to the extent of allotment made, and then block the remaining amount in the account. The amount held in the account of the customer will continue to earn interest as applicable to the account. Shorter turnaround time for entire IPO processing. Now we'll talk about qualified institutional placement, QIP, which is also very important for your exam. So a qualified institutional placement is a capital raising tool wherein a listed company can issue equity shares, fully and partly converted debentures, or any other security other than the warrants that are convertible into equity shares. But unlike in an IPO or an FPO, only institutions or qualified institutional buyers can participate in a QIP. So in case of QIP, only QIB. QIB means qualified institutional buyers. So in case of QIP, only QIBs can participate in the QIP. To be a qualified institutional buyer, सेबी के साथ रजिस्टर कराना पड़ता है अपने आप को. So for example, like QIBs are mutual funds, scheduled commercial bank, FIYs that are registered with the SEBI, insurance companies, etc. So it is a tool wherein if a company wants to like raise money, it can raise money through these financial institutions, SEBI, banks. So directly retail investors से money raise ना करके जब आप किसी financial institution से commercial banks को अपने shares issue करके उनसे money raise करते, that is known as qualified institutional placement. So why this come into play? It comes into play because इसमें जो regulatory compliance है वो बहुत ज़्यादा कम है. So now we'll talk about the SEBI, the Securities and Exchange Board of India. So SEBI is a registered is a statutory regulatory body established on 12th of April 1992 under the SEBI Act 1992. So what does the SEBI do is it protects the interest of the investors. It makes sure that there is no insider trading. So it makes sure that whether a company can be listed on a stock exchange or not. So all these powers are in the hand of SEBI. So it monitors and regulates the Indian capital and the securities market while ensuring to protect the interest of the investors, formulating regulations and guidelines to be adhered to. Power of the SEBI is to regulate or prohibit the issue of the prospectus. The head office of the SEBI is in Mumbai. A broker is registered with SEBI and is a member of a recognized stock exchange and is permitted to do trading of different stock exchanges. For example, Angel Broking, Zerodha, all these broking houses have to get registered with the SEBI. So the top MCQs which are important for your exams are, first is, in a prospectus which does not have details of either the price or the number of shares being offered or the amount of issue, but the number of shares in the upper and the lower price band are disclosed. So a prospectus wherein the price of the share is not disclosed. There is only upper and the lower band. No fixed price of the share is disclosed. That prospectus is called as RHP, red herring prospectus. The correct answer is A. Next. Issue of shares or of convertible security by a company to a selected group of persons. It is called as C, private placement. When a company issues its shares to a selected group of persons, it is called as private placement. Thank you so much. So this is the end of the session. I hope you liked the session. Please do like it.